Welcome to the Mockingcast, the podcast of Mockingbird Ministries. I'm David Zoll, your host, and in just a few moments, I'll be joined by my co-hosts, Sarah Condon and RJ Heyman. We come to you every week to explore a few of the places where we currently see grace, and its absence, playing out in unexpected and compelling ways. I'm glad to have you with us.
Praise the Lord. Praise the Lord. God.
Happy Easter!
Happy Easter. He is risen.
Christes Anesta.
in Christes in neckties.
Yeah, I'm always like, wait, is that okay? Yeah, okay, we say that now. Okay, got it.
Okay.
Cool.
What's the third syllable?
We just said hallelujah in my church growing up, but okay, is this what we say now? Okay.
How was it, Sarah? What was Easter like for you?
Oh, Easter was so good, which who knows with holidays, y'all, how they're going to go for me. And it was really, really nice. I will say I have totally avoided the thing that will most link Easter to my mother, which is Easter egg dyeing with the children. If there are like fun, really messy things to do around holidays that are not religious, then they will remind me of my mother. So we have the white eggs, we have the dye. I just haven't been able to cope with that yet. But Easter was beautiful. It was beautiful at Holy Spirit. It was beautiful with my students at Rice. It was just, which again, I just never know what I'm walking into right now. So I was thankful for that.
Yeah. Wow. Well, I'm glad to hear it. This feels
Praise God.
Did you feel like every holiday you get through something? Is that?
Oh, yeah. And, I spent a lot of time with a woman who lost both parents in the same way when she was 25. And she told me that the anticipation is worse than the actual thing. Mm-hmm. And that was very helpful because it actually makes the anticipation not as bad because you're like, this won't be as bad as I think it's going to be. And so far that, that's been true. So.
Yeah. Well, I saw some pictures of some glitter bombs going off in the Condon household, and young Neil looked like he was having a lot of fun lording it over the smaller children.
Yeah, I have a friend who is an ordained lady in the neighborhood, and we just have our own show on Bravo at this point, and she totally rented like day of called the rental company on Monday after Easter and rented a giant bouncy house that was an ice cream truck and had them put it in her backyard.
Amazing.
It was so nice. And we all ate together and, I brought food. There was a ham somebody had given us when my parents died that we just handed to her because we had so much food and she'd frozen it. Mm-hmm. And so our terrible joke was that was the costliest part of the meal because we totally ate the ham at Easter. So deep, dark symbolism, but also delicious. So yeah, it was nice. What did you guys do?
Well, RJ was covered in the news.
RJ was like
a local
the Easter celebrity this year.
What happened there, RJ? I'm getting forwards from people.
You were like the Tom Selleck of Easter.
Oh my gosh, totally. I grew a mustache and everything. If only I could grow a mustache. Although all the people who saw him on Friends were like, Tom Selleck has a mustache? What? What are you talking about? We had a great Easter, man. We had we added 2 extra tents, one for more people, one for the orchestra that we had. So we had an orchestra because we couldn't sing, So orchestra, handbell choir, tons of people showed up, tons of new people, amazing Easter egg hunt. Yeah, and then the local newspaper showed up, and we were front page Monday, and then the local news station showed up, and we were on the 6 p.m. news right after the Pope. It was Pope Francis, and then
it was
Trinity.
Here's Protestant guy.
Yeah, exactly. Although I was wearing my chasuble, my holy poncho, so being rather Catholic.
Did you have on a weird hat?
I do not do the hats.
Okay.
Not yet. No hats were worn. But it was a wonderful day. And my youngest brother, Daniel, and his wife and new baby were in town visiting, which was so much fun. So just nice to have. We're at the point like where friends and family come to visit. It's so great. And then they leave and like we just get very sad. We're like, please come back. We're lonely. We miss you. But it was really, really fun. Of course, as I was sharing with you earlier, the one thing is our internet, man. So our live stream was like okay, but not great. It was a little glitchy, so that was frustrating. But except for that, it was just really exceeded all my expectations. Like it was as good as it could. The weather is beautiful, and it was a true celebration. It was wonderful.
Good.
I'm so glad.
Yeah.
We had this sort of miraculous event where we had a service outdoors at a farm of one of our clergy, actually, Mary Lou of Thomas. They have just a big old Virginia farm, and 650 people showed up, and I mean,
unbelievable.
It was an Easter miracle. It was really nice. I mean, it was a lot. I think we kind of scratching our heads. I think we thought half that many people would come because it's 30 minutes outside of Charlottesville.
Were you guys like, where are they parking? Like, I mean, like, I'm like, is it suddenly, it's like the first Woodstock, you know? And everybody's like, whoa.
There were cars everywhere. I mean, it's just kind of that palpable excitement that you...
Yeah.
And I had driven back from Washington early in the morning and was a little bit out of it, to be honest with you, because I didn't have much of a role. I was just there to sort of say some prayers. And people just kept on coming and coming and coming and coming. And you felt like you're either in the Field of Dreams. It was like the
Field of Dreams Day. I was going to say, yeah, exactly.
It felt like Field of Dreams a little bit. And for us, who haven't really gotten to do like anything for a long time, it felt like a real godsend, to be honest with you.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
Well, your Palm Sunday kind of got rained out or something, right? Didn't it? Did you have big Palm Sunday plans?
Not kind of. It got completely rained out. It was like a big thunderstorm.
So thank God. Praise God.
Yeah, it was nice. So I'll take that with it's a shot in the arm, as they say, but not the vaccination kind, which is the first thing we're going to talk about today. I thought we haven't really attempted a humor piece for a little bit, but the New Yorker put this out, and I thought it was very funny. Eli Grober wrote, "Things fully vaccinated people are still not allowed to do." Here at the CDC, we have announced a new set of public health recommendations for people who are fully vaccinated against COVID-19. However, there are a number of things that vaccinated people are still not allowed to do. Please familiarize yourself with this list. Number one, reply all. Once you are fully vaccinated, you are still not allowed to reply all to an email that was clearly not meant to solicit such a reply. Similarly, getting the vaccine does not give you the green light to CC 200 people on an email. Next, you are not allowed to stay unmuted during group Zooms. Just because you're fully vaccinated doesn't mean that everyone wants to hear all the sniffing and typing and fidgeting you do while in a Zoom meeting. Mute yourself whether you've got the shot or not. Next, you're not allowed to not order fries, then eat your friends' fries off their plates. No kind of vaccine will ever make it okay to do this. Even if you're vaccinated and eating outdoors, masked and distanced, just order your own damn fries. And then finally, you're still not allowed to suddenly stop walking up a flight of stairs to look at your phone. Like developing a vaccine, going upstairs is an activity that demands your full attention. You may be immune to the novel coronavirus, but you're certainly not immune to a person behind you walking straight into your butt. Get to the top of the stairs, then look at your phone, and then be grateful for modern medicine.
That's great.
Now, Sarah, I mean, you're partly vaccinated. Are you fully vaccinated?
No, I'll be fully vaccinated. By the time it comes out, I'll be fully on Thursday. Yeah.
Are you feeling entitled to just do whatever you please? Or is that, you've spoken in past podcasts that some of your compunction about caring about all the little things has gone away since December. What?
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's funny. I had to go to the doctor today because my throat, I'm convinced I'm just convinced I have cancer. Let's be real. And it's like a little swollen, but no. I mean, anyway, you don't need all my symptoms, but I was like, I have cancer. And I went to the doctor today, and I'd never seen this doctor before. And it was this lovely Texas lady who spoke Spanglish. And she was like, she's like, you don't really have any symptoms for anything serious. And I think that's just baby anxiety. And then I just like burst into tears and she like couldn't find Kleenexes. It was amazing. She was so tender and sweet. But yeah, I'm really scared of dying. Like, not because I'm scared of death, but because like my children cannot have more death in their lives.
Right.
So I'm actually like more probably vigilant right now than I was 6 months ago about like doing all the things. So it's weird, like, because I know people, and maybe you guys know some of these
Sarah,
people too.
those will save you from death, just so you know. All those things you're doing will 100% prevent you from dying.
Dave, you're one of these people that like you got COVID late.
I definitely did.
You know?
Yes.
I
Like
thought I
a
had COVID
dummy.
last week.
Like a
I went
dummy.
I got a COVID test. I was like, if I get COVID Holy Week, that will just be. I'm like, I'm gonna fly Dave's all down to preach.
Oh my gosh. I mean, I feel like I there's like a twofold thing where it's like, A, like I don't want everyone to think I'm a moron. Sorry, Dave. And then B, like I don't want to like cause my children more grief. So yeah,
Sure.
I'm definitely like wearing the mask and doing all the things. And I feel no freedom. Like I'm like, I guess we're just gonna wear masks forever. Like I'm just like, I feel no freedom to like do otherwise. I'm hoping that goes away though. Like,
And you get a little more careless.
I mean, I miss restaurants so much.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
You know, like indoor restaurant, nice glass of wine, my husband, like, oh my gosh. Like you know, and I know the restaurants miss my money. So it's like that there are things that like I really hope to do.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Well, Anne Helen Peterson, you know, who wrote that book, Can't Even, she put out a newsletter this week just saying that like, I'm ready, but I'm not ready.
Yeah.
And I think it captures what a lot of people feel, and that like you cannot wait for the party or the wedding or the, you know, going to restaurants, and then you get right up to it and you're like, but I'll go in a few more weeks. You know, there's as in all things, the, you know, other things are driving the train than facts.
Yeah.
You know, facts
Yes.
are very much secondary in this
The
situation.
fear of
Yes.
missing out is not quite as strong as the fear. Still.
It's just the fear of dying.
It's just the fear.
Yeah. Yeah.
RJ,
Yeah.
what about you? What do you think? This list was funny? Is there anything that should be on it?
The one that skewered me, which you didn't read, which is still apparently not okay, is playing devil's advocate, because I just feel that in myself, especially if I'm talking to someone who's just like really, really on some bandwagon. I want to be like, but on the other hand, you know, and I just have to like stop myself and just like just nod.
It's
nicely.
never
Yeah.
okay to play devil's advocate. You're
RJ,
just
I never
contentious.
thought about like that is like a very strong tendency you have.
Oh, totally.
No, it's not.
Yeah. I mean, like, when I worked with you, I would come in and be like, can you believe this? You're like, well, I can, because, like, I think you have such a deep sense of people's fallenness that you're, like, that, it's funny. Like,
Well, I think the good thing is it does flow a little bit from compassion, like
Yeah.
knowing that, like,
Oh,
as
for
strongly as I
sure.
feel about something, or as right as I think I might be, there's always another point of view, or I'm probably wrong.
Right.
But then part of it is just also arrogance. Let's be
Oh,
honest.
okay.
And like,
Okay.
and like the,
Okay.
and
I
like
like
the,
that cocktail,
you know,
RJ.
like the need to be, you know, the need to be right, or have like an alternate opinion, or sort of, you know,
Yes.
stake my claim to,
Well, I mean,
some insight.
What would Jamie say if we asked her about your devil's advocacy? Is she thrilled with it? I mean, has she made peace with it?
We kind of do it. We kind of do it to each other. Like, we both sometimes are like, actually, I didn't want your opinion. I just wanted you to nod and listen and agree with me. And then
Yes.
maybe, like, you know, scratch my head and tell me you love me. That's all I really wanted. So, yeah, we probably both. She I'm sure she would agree. I'm sure
I
she
wasn't
would agree.
asking you so you could fix this.
Yeah,
big-
we're both pretty contrarian, though.
Yeah.
I think actually at the end of the day,
Jamie, I'm going to give you some pushback on that.
yeah, exactly.
I feel like you're looking for feedback.
But have you considered this? You know, have you
I-
considered? Yeah.
I tell you what you can do with your pushback. The
Yeah, not to be a total, you know what, but you know. You
what's funny, I was talking to someone the other day who was like just got so convinced that to love other people is to tell them the truth all the time, and you just want to say, I was like, please don't love me that way. Like,
Please do not.
because I do not interpret it that way.
No.
Maybe other people
as
do,
if
and maybe
you know
it
the
is.
truth, bro. As if you have any idea what's actually true.
Yes.
Nobody knows what's true. Come on.
Yes. And
Well-
what is imputation if not the greatest lie we've ever been given?
Yes, there you go.
You know what I mean?
I'll take it.
Imputation is a lie. A legal fiction.
Speaking of actual legal nonfictions, one of us signed a contract to buy a house.
Okay.
Am I allowed to say this, Sarah? Is this not?
So we actually had to pull back. You and I have not talked about this yet. I know.
I had such a good segue.
Disappointed.
We did. I know it's a good segue, but we had to pull back. We're looking at a different house. It'll be fun, but yes, we did.
But why don't you give us the context for this next article? Is that Sarah has been, lots of people know this, but some people don't. But when you're in full-time ministry, you often live in houses that are owned by churches. Called in our denomination, they're called rectories.
Right.
They're parsonages, that sort of things, and
manses, as my Baptist grandmother called them.
Manses, yeah.
Yes.
Someone said that to
Do
me
y'all
one
live
time.
in a
What's a manse?
Yeah.
So you want to sort of
glebe.
It's common to want to build some equity and have a place of your own.
Yeah.
And it sounds like you guys are pursuing that option wholeheartedly. I hope I'm not speaking out of turn, but
No, we definitely are. And I mean, part of it for us is also like when I lost my parents, I lost Mississippi. And it's a place, for all its many problems, I dearly love. And so, yeah,
Imputation.
Imputation. And, I've been very open. I really did learn more about the sin and redemption of Jesus Christ in the classrooms of the Southern Studies Department at Ole Miss than I ever did at seminary. And so, yeah, we're looking at houses in Oxford, which has been exciting, but also because we've literally never owned anything before. Because we've always lived in church housing. It's that's exciting too. So, and I have family there. Just feels like a God thing. So
yeah. Well, I know that there was a Saturday Night Live thing recently, about people who
oh my gosh,
in middle
I think
age,
of this all the time right now. Yes, instead of looking at porn, we look at Zillow.
They look at Zillow. It's people instead of
Totally.
I know something really exciting we can do tonight.
Trulia.
Look at Zillow or
I
watch
have all these apps.
Watch House Hunters. And this next article is actually by Nora Kaplan-Bricker in The Point, and it's titled House Hunters. And she sort of weaves in all this commentary about a murder mystery writer named Tana French that I haven't read, but it sounds fascinating. But most of it's also about home ownership and that particular journey for people. She writes, "For people like me who came of age around 2008, the promise of the property ladder lay in pieces. So the story went because we understood that we would never reach even the lowest rung or would fall into bottomless debt if we did. I try not to trust too much of what I read in the style section of the New York Times, but I will admit that stories about millennials as eternal renters formed my understanding of my own future, in which, for a long time, I never expected to own anything of more value than a laptop or bicycle. In the past year, the pandemic has rewritten the trend around my generation. Homeownerships have risen to their highest level since 2008, driven mostly by buyers in their 30s and early 40s. Maybe global instability inspired people to exert control over the personal sphere, imparting a sense of urgency strong enough to overcome the story that we've been told about ourselves. Or maybe low mortgage rates simply underscored what was already becoming evident. Even if most millennials won't earn as much as their parents, that's consistent with many millennials amassing more than enough wealth to acquire property. At the simplest level, it's easy to see why people confined to their homes would start dreaming of bigger and better ones. I, too, would like to escape my apartment, where the kitchen table has become my husband's desk in this work-from-home era, and there's nowhere to be alone, in the sense of out of earshot. Since the advent of the pandemic, I've spent more evenings on Zillow than I care to count, flipping through serene images of empty rooms with parquet floors and tiled fireplaces, or sunny kitchen nooks overlooking backyards.
All white. And that's the only way you have a kitchen now.
Yes, with lots of islands. Maybe 2 islands.
Lots of islands.
An archipelago.
She writes, I routinely work my way through every listing in my own Boston neighborhood where I can't afford anything, and in several small New England cities where I could possibly afford something. The pleasures of Zillow are the pleasures of miniatures. Each overpriced condo becomes a virtual dollhouse, a world whose charm is that it can be comprehended in a single glance or arranged to my liking with the barest nudge of a fingertip. At the same time, I'm embarrassed by this acquisitional make-believe, which suggests that the bourgeois imagination formed by my comfortable childhood remains stronger than the more capacious one I've tried to cultivate since. Homeownership is the ultimate inoculation against life contingencies, or so we are led to believe. The only people who are capable of either unfettered action or unfettered thought are those who have the mental security of permanent safety, argues one character in a ton of French mystery. Once you own your home free and clear, what is there left for anyone, landlords, employers, banks, to threaten you with? I wanted us to have that freedom. Of course, no house can be made fast against disaster. Even the most peaceful homes hold the memories of small misfortunes and everyday cruelties. In this sense, every house is haunted. Our habitations also give lodging to the ghosts of things that didn't happen. If every life is full of branching possibilities, then every house contains countless unlived destinies, 1,000,000 better outcomes, and 1,000,000 that are worse. So a house is not only a place where one lives, but a physical embodiment of the life that one lives in it. To lose a home is to lose the self that took shape inside its frame. The dream houses of Zillow appeal to our imaginations as places where private life could perhaps take root beyond the reach of the present's cascading emergencies. To escape at least occasionally into personal happiness is a matter of bare human necessity. But I've noticed that hunting for houses I can't buy on the internet leaves me less prepared to inhabit reality. Oh, a lot there, but this...
I mean, it was all really good.
Yeah, it's a fascinating reflection. I find, everywhere I go, maybe it's the stage of life, maybe it's the pandemic, maybe it's just, the cliche of just white people remodeling houses that is my town.
In all white.
In all white, yeah. But people are singularly fixated on real estate, and they sort of will do anything for it.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I don't know.
I mean,
do you follow this impulse at all? Because I feel it a little bit.
For sure. I mean, I've had to think a lot about this. It's funny. I had therapy last week, and I was kind of like, what am I going to talk about? Which is hilarious given my life circumstances right now. But
like, really?
That's how big my ego is. I was like, I got nothing. And we were talking about, us looking at houses. And I just was like, burst into tears, which is clearly a theme of my life. I was like, I just want home back. That's part of this is the sheer comfort of what home felt like and wanting my parents back too, right? I mean, what she said is so brutal. Like, to lose your childhood home is to lose yourself. Mm-hmm. I mean, I feel that, like, intimately. And maybe that's just because I've lost it in such a brutal way. I don't know. I know the last time I was in it, I wrapped both arms around, walls and wept. I mean, I don't know that most people have that experience when they leave their childhood home, but
yeah.
I mean, it is all the things she said, and I fully understand this sense, and I don't blame anyone for it of safety. When you feel like you own your home.
Yeah, or it's definitely like a myth that if you own your home, you can have complete security. That's a very, very powerful myth.
But it's a really alluring myth. I mean, totally. I say to Josh all the time, I'm like, look, if you die, we lose this house. This is the rectory, and he's always like, why am I the one that dies first? Like, this is the ongoing. So, yeah.
Well, we've talked about this before, Sarah, a little bit about the difference in your experience versus Dave and mine, where I hope I'm not speaking too much for you, Dave, but I didn't really have a child at home, right? We moved around so much that there is no place that I have that kind of emotionality around. Mm-hmm. And yet, I really relate to this article, and part of it is, we also live in a rectory, which is lovely, but we still own our house in Houston, and we miss it. Like, we loved that. We loved that house, and our kids kind of, we had a baby in that house, and our kids grew up in that house, and we did a lot to that house. Like, I built the deck in the backyard, and we made a lot of choices about flooring and about tiles, and it was kind of, when we moved in, we kind of never thought we'd live in a house that nice ever, so the idea that it was ours, my wife, it was funny. She leaned up against the kitchen island, because it has an island, and she slapped her hands on it. She's like, well, honey, I think we're ready to have kids now. You know, and of course the joke was is that we had like a 12-year-old and a 10-year-old already. You know, so I feel that I was, you know, as she was talking about interest rates and the current situation, what I was feeling more was how do I say this right? Every opportunity you have, like around something like a house or like, I don't know, the stock market or whatever, every opportunity ends up feeling like a law. It feels like a burden, you know, because here, and part of that is where we are right now too, because everyone's moving to South Florida. And like our hope is to at some point sell our place in Houston and buy something here. But now we're like, is that ever going to happen? Did we miss the boat? Should we have bought as soon as we got here? Have housing prices got so out of control? And did we miss this opportunity? And did we mismanage our money? And did we, you know, it's like things getting better, you feel like you've fallen behind or you've missed an opportunity. So I'm trying not to feel like the heaviness of that, just to be like, look, it's been a pandemic. We just moved in. Like oil was $0 a barrel this time last year. It made no sense to sell our house.
Yeah.
But just feeling the weight of trying to make, you know, always the best possible, most optimized decisions you possibly can. And I'm sure you're going through the same thing, right? Is this the right decision?
Awful.
Should we be doing this?
Yes.
It's terrible. And it feels like such a burden, rather, you know, regret and sort of rather than just enjoying your life, you know, and being thankful for what you have, which is actually what the article is about, right? Yeah. Like inhabiting your actual life rather than your hoped for life or regretting a life that you're not living or something, just because our life is actually, well, you know, we're in a pandemic, but it's still pretty good.
Yeah.
I gotta say.
Yeah. Look, my life is pretty good. And if I can say that, you guys can deal with yours.
An incredible life.
That's so funny.
Gosh.
I never feel like I have a great life, but even though from the outside looking in,
that's the depression, Dave.
What? I keep thinking.
I do. You know what I do? I do when people come to visit. Like when my brother and his wife were here for 10 days, I was like, I love our life. When the Adams were here for spring break, I was like, I love our life. And then they go away and you get back to sort of the regular routine. And I love my family, but I know my wife feels the same way. Like we, it's actually nice to have a full house.
Right.
You know? Yeah.
Well, the house thing is just such the locus of what occupies people's minds, I think, especially at this age. And I think it does have something to do with you're trying to provide security for children. Yeah. And roots and things like that. Because you're right.
The nesting instinct is a thing.
I'm such a sentimental person, but I'm not sentimental about places. It's just it's a strange like missing chip. Even though I say that, and when she writes about houses being haunted or you seeing ghosts of people, Jesus. And Sarah, I mean that would strike you in a very different way,
specific way.
But it's funny. Like I was just in. So, you know, my wife's family lives in Washington, D.C., and so I'm always back there. And I lived a different life at one point in Washington. Like I went to college there, and it's gotten to the point where like there's these overlapping layers of ghosts that I almost get used to. It's like, oh yeah, that's the place where that happened, and that's the place where that happened. And sometimes they collide, and sometimes you just learn to tune them out, and maybe you never get rid of those. The amount of times, or I at least used to be at dinner parties, and the conversation would turn to real estate. And for me, it's such a, I got to the point where I was like, is this just something people talk about when they don't want to talk about other things? Yeah. Or is it that we're really that focused on real estate as our identity and our aspirations? Or
is it that she lives in a tiny little apartment and just is desperate to get out and have a little more space?
Well, you know, that's definitely the case. I mean,
there's the pandemic aspect to it as well. Yeah.
Right now, everyone's thinking about how they can make their space better.
Are we all like dealing with an existential crisis of wondering where home is? I mean, you know, like that's more than just like me and my stuff. Like,
right.
So, yeah.
Morrissey has a song called Home is a Question Mark. I always think that's it's a powerful song.
Well, and I say this stuff all the time on the podcast, but for so long it wasn't. For so long, home was the same place you stayed your whole life, you know? And like it is a very recent occurrence for most of the populations of humanity to leave. I mean, like that's, you know, so yeah, I mean, it doesn't feel normal or natural to us. I think it doesn't to me at all. I mean, like for me, it is absolutely the hand of God that my aunt bought a house in Oxford, Mississippi 2 weeks before my parents died. It is the hand of God that my two boy cousins, who are the ones who climbed into the wreckage of an RV in a junkyard to find my mother's purse, that those two men live in Oxford, Mississippi full time. Like, that is like that. Those are people who are intrinsically connected to my heart and always will be. And so, you know, for me, there is this like real sense of peace and home when I think about having a place there.
That's beautiful.
So,
That's one of the reasons when you were talking about shopping for a house, it felt like, just seemed like the God-given avenue for the moment.
Yeah, for us, it totally is. I mean, just because one didn't work out doesn't mean, girl, you know, I was like, okay, on to the next. Like, we gonna get a house there. But I'm not sure I've actually ever had such a sense of God's presence in like doing this, you know, and doing something like this. Like, it's just like, yes, you need people in your life who knew and loved and missed your parents in the way that you do, and you need them there regularly. So
yeah. Well, RJ, the other thing I'd say that I really resonate with what you said about, it's definitely an area where I feel the weight of the law in a very powerful sense, in that there is a very accepted right way to do this and wrong way to do this, and you can really get this.
Yeah.
You can really go down the wrong path.
And Dave, did you refinance, Dave? Did you refinance, Dave? Have you refinanced?
We did recently refinance, and I tell you,
you're winning.
Well, you'd be an idiot not to, Dave.
Okay, good.
What? I did a great job.
Amazing.
I'm so great.
Victory.
Let me tell you, it was like
You won.
I had no idea what I was doing the entire time. I was just doing what people had told me to do.
It'll turn out
I guess
that
this
it was
is what
a
I do now.
huge mistake. I just want to say it'll just turn out.
It was a massive mistake.
Well, how do you when you see a mortgage and like what you owe on something like that? How do you feel any relief about that? I find to myself that's like a prison wall.
It's nuts.
You know, it's like
it is.
Here's something that you can make sure you'll never do anything interesting ever again. I guess I'm in a slightly morose mood today.
No, but the burden of getting all this stuff right? All these major life decisions, like are you maxing out your IRA? Have you refinanced? You know, did you buy in the right neighborhood? You know, it's just like,
I want to say this like with great trepidation, but at least in my household, and whether or not I'm a bad feminist or a good feminist, I'm a saved feminist by the blood of Jesus. So, okay. I feel like a lot of that burden often falls on men. Of like the right interest rates. Like, you're all playing like math games. You know what I mean? That you're like not good at and don't have an education for. But like a lot of the women in your life are like, I don't know. You know, I mean, certainly we have friends who are the reverse of that, but like, it is like pretty. I mean, I think some of that burden falls more on men in a lot of relationships, and you're like, you don't know what the hell you're doing.
No, we don't. Just have mercy. Have mercy.
That could be, Sarah. I'm not going to argue with that assessment. It does often feel that way. Remember, I've never gotten more feedback on a joke I made in a sermon than when I once said, that one of the great confounding mysteries of midlife was that I didn't realize that what you're supposed to do is be everyone's flipping houses all the time. Like, it was where I was living. It's like, oh, well, we're going to live here for a little while and then do this renovation so we can get into that house and this house. And I was like, I never got this memo. I don't know where I was the day that they handed out the guidebook to sort of like living in this ingrained, having your own kingdom by the sea by the age of 45. And that is, again, that's very contextual. That's where I live. It probably says a lot about sort of, East Coast
how much white paint you have
privilege.
In your house.
But I just, it's hard not to resent how much emotional space it occupies, or at least
also,
space
and then
period.
You're living in a house that's perpetually staged and never actually lived in, which like that just can't be good for like marriage and parenting. And
maybe that's a great metaphor for modern life.
Well, can I say one thing? And I know I'm like always biblical guy, but
please.
But Sarah, as you were talking about this modern phenomenon of like leaving home. I thought about the Bible, and I thought about, I was talking about Thomas Cahill, this author that I love, and who wrote this series of books, The Hinges of History. But one of them is the Gifts of the Jews, and he talks about Abraham being called to leave his home. And that was like this new how history was circular up to that point and repeating. But when God calls Abraham, suddenly history becomes directional. And I do think there's actually, as I think about the Bible, there's something deeply Christian, biblical about leaving home. You know, Jesus leaves home to come to earth. You know, Paul leaves home to plant churches. Abraham leaves home to go to a land that God has not yet shown him. You know, Moses has to leave home to go to Midian for 40 years. There's something about that we shouldn't feel like there's something wrong with us or we've done something wrong if we feel called or just have to leave home for some reason, because God seems always to force people to leave home.
That's a good word.
I hope I don't get called to do any of the things that were just listed, but
Well, how many times have you left home, Sarah?
a lot.
Yeah, exactly. Many times. Many times.
Well, we're going to talk slightly about something a little related, and that was the recalibration of ambition, or ambition as a driver of anxiety. That this can take the house hunting form, but I think it's a more general phenomenon. And there's a fascinating article that appeared in Elle magazine by Lottie Jeps. She's an English writer, and she loses a high-profile job in marketing right at the beginning of the pandemic, and she writes about this long piece about how she's come to appreciate an existence on the other side of performancism. Really, and they even use that word. They're seeking a less performative life, a less staged existence, RJ. And she's finding more and more peers who feel similarly, sort of people who are in praise of mediocrity. So she couches what she's learned in terms of the urging she'd absorbed during childhood, that the only life worth living is an extraordinary one. In her view, the pandemic has schooled many of us in the pitfalls of that kind of ambition. Here's what she writes. She says, "It turned out that the unexceptional life I'd been running away from wasn't so tragic after all. I felt happier and freer than I had in a long time after losing that job. Yes, it was an ongoing battle with my inner monologue. I wasn't failing. I wasn't betraying feminism. But to my surprise, I didn't burn with envy when I saw peers getting jobs I would normally have gone for. And with that came a rush of relief. By pressing pause on my relentless ambition, I realized that I didn't need to win anymore. I just wanted to enjoy the game." And then she talks to a 35-year-old ex-magazine editor who laughs at herself, saying, "I find myself having to constantly fight the urge to create another narrative around this less exciting existence. To announce on social media, this is the new me, just to show people that I've made the, quote, right decision. But actually, when you give up trying to prove to the world how great what you do is, you stop boxing yourself into your own life choices. You have more freedom to give things a go and discover what you actually enjoy." Her take on it reminds me of something the journalist turned philosopher Oliver Burkeman writes, our friend Oliver. "The conscious or subconscious belief that what you do is incredibly consequential has the effect of making the stakes too high to enjoy life. You end up feeling like you're perpetually holding the world on your shoulders, so that if you don't make it through your to-do list or fulfill your various obligations or, quote, realize your potential, something truly calamitous will happen. Well," says Lottie, "I've ditched that burden, and now the stakes are lower. Like my friend Sophie, I take pleasure from the everyday rhythms of a life that doesn't seek to impress. But we are well into our 30s. That's a long time to have spent reaching for the stars before relaxing into more earthly expectations. But besides, if this year has taught us anything, it's that success can be fleeting. Our expectation of what extraordinary looks like are altering. Never before has the work of nurses, carers, and cleaners been held in such stark relief to the, quote, influencers escaping to party in Dubai. Maybe the illusion of self-importance is finally being exposed." And of course, it's not that we actually want to be Beyonce or Elon Musk, but we feel we have to be the Beyonce of our own lives, the peak version of ourselves. She closes by saying that she believes that we may be on the vanguard of a backlash to our hyper-performative, endlessly on 110% culture, and many of us are starting to aspire to something shudderingly average instead.
You know what they call the place where they make really average stuff? The Satisfactory.
Oh, okay.
There you go. Where's that in the Bible,
A comedy
RJ?
moment and a Bible moment. Okay.
My son was reading bad jokes I think at Easter lunch. Actually, we were talking about puns. I was like, that one works. So
you did not find this to be a hopeful word, Sarah? Giving up on an extraordinary life in honor?
Well, I mean, I think
overly
that's hopeful.
optimistic.
I don't think that that's gonna happen. I don't.
Her prediction at the end.
Sounds like she and her friend have a cool club, and maybe she started going to AA, and that's cool. But like, I don't. You know what I mean? Like, that will always be the fringe.
Yep.
I mean, that there is that like.
She felt the need to write about it.
Yeah.
She did.
For a major publication, right?
Broadcast her newfound mediocrity.
Like, okay, Elle magazine. Yeah, no, it's like I'm a simple farmer now. Yeah, no, I mean, I don't know that people.
She's launching her influencer brand next week.
And this is
my
why
bland
you
is
should buy
called-
my
Find me on
bland.
Instagram.
I just don't know that people are going to get on board with that. I mean, I don't know. Like, I on the one hand, I will say as I was hearing it, I promise I won't always talk about my dead parents, but it hasn't even been 6 months. I did hear it and think, well, I've already had an extraordinary thing happen in my life that has made me really value the normal and want no more extraordinary things to happen in my life, be they good or bad. I just want a normal life.
Yeah.
My ambition for anything is pretty much gone. Honestly, it just is. Like, I feel like I said this last week. People have called me to be like, "Hey, will you come speak at your church?" If you're listening to this, no, I will not come speak at your church. I can't even believe you asked me. So,
In fact, never call me again.
so you know, I do like I do feel that, but I think I don't know. It just seems very unlikely that everyone is that they're. It's like the glory story can't be undone. Do you know what I mean? Like when we talk about the gospel story versus the glory story, and the glory story being this idea of like, you know, I can do all, like, it's sort of like the I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me, and the I is the most important part, right? Mm-hmm. And I think you can't take something like I'm going to live a humbler life that's simpler and make it a glory story, because then it's not a humbler life that's simpler. Then it's not the thing on the fringe.
You mean, yeah.
And this choice against the self will always be on the fringe. And most people will be there, not of their own choosing.
Huh.
I mean,
yeah.
I don't want to be there. I wish I was still ambitious AF, you know? Like, I wish...
Do you?
Yes. It was a kid. Are you kidding me? When I had 2 alive parents who every time I talked to them on the phone, they told me I was like the most incredible person in the world, and when was I going to run for bishop? Yes. That was fun. You know what I mean?
When are you going to run for bishop, Sarah?
You had good parents.
But this is hard, you know? Is it beautiful in some ways that my previous life is not? Yes. Oh my gosh. Like, yes. But I don't know. I mean, it came at a great cost. So.
Yeah, you're not there by choice.
No. I said to my husband the other day, I don't like this trade. When we were talking about buying a house, I said, and I was crying. I don't like this trade. And he said, "Oh, sweetheart, this is not a trade. We did not get to choose this." So,
yeah.
The article reminded me of something that the late Bishop Ed Salmon said, which was that that basically to love is to be anxious, right? That love is anxiety producing, and he said this to our friend of ours, Alex Large. You know, you don't get anxious about your relationship with the cashier at the grocery store because you don't have a relationship with them. But if you love someone or something, then you're always going to be anxious about it. That's what it produces. So, and I'd say that in the context of like my own ambition, where like here I am at this church, and I do want to kind of build something and grow something. And is it out of my own selfish conceit, my ego? I mean, I'm sure there's a little bit of that in there, but I also I do kind of feel like it's because I love this place, and I love these people, and I love this message. And I think, I think Paul was he? Yeah, Paul was ambitious.
I don't know.
He definitely got anxious about things. Ambitious is the wrong word.
I think it's the wrong
It's not
word,
the right
RJ,
word.
because you have deep, deep love. I mean, I've seen you with people you love.
But that's
You
what
have
I'm
deep
saying.
love
That's
for
what I'm
these
saying.
people.
Like,
Yeah.
I actually don't feel like I'm that ambitious.
Yeah.
Like, I don't need to have the biggest church in the world or to be a
Right.
bishop or whatever. But I want what I'm doing to go well. And part of that is because I want people to think well of me and I want to feel good about myself. But part of that is also I do as hard and stressful as it is sometimes, I do love what I do. And I know you guys do too. You love what you do.
Yeah.
And you love Jesus and you love this message and you want more people to hear it. And you love to see it when it connects with someone
It's
and the
amazing.
freedom and peace that it brings. But that also does produce anxiety. That anxiety isn't always just the product of vain ambition. Sometimes it's a product of love. And like Jesus got pretty damn anxious in the Garden of Gethsemane, you know, but he was willing to sort of experience that out of love for us and for God. So I don't know. I hear her.
I feel like Christianity is usually an argument against this sort of personal ambition that at least the college students that I work with are completely oppressed by. Like it's not even a question in their minds that like they need to be ambitious, and you know, lots of that can be. I mean, you could say that's like the product of privilege or something. But you can. How many times have I seen kids who feel like they have no option but to go to college and to go to graduate school, even though in their heart of hearts they're not really cut out for it and they should be doing something else. But it's not even, there's no cultural permission whatsoever to quote unquote settle. I always think of that Onion article as like hopeless loser from high school still living in hometown with happily married with 3 children and and working for dad's company, and like how dare they not move to New York.
All his friends were like, oh, what's wrong with him?
I always think about that.
I mean,
they said from their studio in LA.
I heard a woman interviewed actually today about, because I work with college students, I'm always sort of absorbing this stuff about young people and how amazing it is now. Adulthoodism. They should all think of adulthood as amazing because there's no longer the set out trajectory where you live in your parents' house, you live at college, you meet someone, you get married, you have children, you work. Now, you can do anything.
Hooray.
It's so great. And, when I think about a piece like this, I think like, oh, really good news. You can delay having people in your life who love you no matter what, guys. Isn't it great? Like, you know what I mean? Like, seriously, wait until you're 35 to fall in love with someone who will love you for who you are. And then wait till you're 38 to have children who will love you for who you are. I mean, you know what I mean? Like, it's just like, this is not good news. Like, this is like you'll have all this time to be in a job that like doesn't care if you're alive or dead and like will work you to death. Like, good news, everyone. It's just, I don't know. I mean, I think it's just harder and harder. It's why I don't actually find this piece to be like realistic, because I think, Dave, you see this all the time. Like it's just, they're so pushed towards what will make them more ambitious.
Mm-hmm. Well, I also I'm just going to say it. I see it in my own life as being my where does my ambition for the gospel end and my ambition for my own name begin? It's very muddy, and a lot of it is deeply narcissistic and sinful, and a driver of enormous unhappiness. Like what a gift it would be, and the moments where I do feel grateful and do feel happy and do feel excited to be doing what the privilege that we've been given to share this news. Like, it's always the times when some sort of personal ambition has kind of died, and or it's been deconstructed, and you're able to accept what's actually there, and to move forward in gratitude rather than, there was another article this week by Arthur Brooks in The Atlantic, and he was talking about how humility is really correlated with contentment. And what he said is that the more you sort of are hung up on certainties and unable to relinquish narratives about how things should be, the less loving you are of other people, and the less charitable you are, and the less connected you are, and the less happy you are, and the less enlightened you are. And something about ambition is usually you are married to some narrative of who you need to be in order to be loved. And life is like a systematic assault on that idea And the gospel is a
Yes.
systematic assault on that idea. And it's painful. It sucks. Like, who wants to experience this? And yet, come to find out, what Easter tells us is that there is life on the other side of the crucifixions we experience in little ways. And maybe that's melodramatic, but I find it to be true. Like, ambition, I'm not sure how I'm going to want to communicate that to my kids, you know? What is it important to them to be super high achieving? I don't know if that's that the extent that I absorb that with sort of mother's milk. I think is probably not a good thing. So I don't know.
Yeah.
What? Why are you laughing at me, Sarah?
I'm just like so bad at parenting. That's what I was laughing at. I was like,
We know.
Neil had to memorize this speech for extra credit because it's fourth grade is like Texas history year, Texas, and it was some Travis speech and about the Alamo and all this stuff, and God is on our side, and he like read it all to me, and I should have been like, oh, you should definitely memorize that and you'll get the extra credit. Like, I should have said something really encouraging. And I was like, just so you know, our family was on the Mexican side. And also, God doesn't like anybody at war. And he's just in the back seat like, yes, ma'am.
Oh, what a wonderful
So anyway,
world.
no tips from me. Oh, my God.
RJ, any final thoughts on that?
No.
Well, this past Sunday, and I want to go into it because you just were featured in these news outlets, and I want to hear.
Oh my gosh,
it's
totally.
a lot of preachers. Maybe people don't know this. Like, as exciting as it is that lots of folks come on Easter, it can be a very difficult day to say anything. I mean, we have this great thing to say. We have the resurrection of the dead. We have, the empty tomb. And yet so many of us find it easier to speak about Good Friday, or you end up doing like a greeting card almost like on Easter and gloss over the difficulties and the anxieties people are really wrestling with, probably as a result of their ambitions, but maybe not. Maybe simply the suffering they've endured. And how do you preach on Easter, RJ? I want to hear from you what you said to folks and how do you feel it connected. And Sarah, I want to hear from you because I find it really interesting. To preach a good Easter sermon is about as hard as you can possibly. It's easier to preach Christmas, I think. But what do you think, Arj?
Well, I don't know if I preached a good Easter sermon. Hopefully I did. I started
What
off
did
by
Jamie
talking
think?
about Disney. She thought it was good.
Okay, good.
She thought
Well,
it was
it was a good
good.
Easter
I don't think she'd
sermon.
think I knocked it out of the park, but I think she thought it was good. And she usually tells me when she's like, that was weak. And she did not say that.
Good.
Started by talking about Disney movies,
Oh,
of
God.
course.
Nice.
Tangled?
No, but I did. I talked about how many movies prominently feature a resurrection.
Oh,
You know, and actually so many Disney movies, from Frozen to Tangled to Pinocchio to Sleeping Beauty, they're all stories of people coming back from the dead. And then I talked about that being true in superhero movies and fantasy movies. And I just talked about how we really long for that to be true, for this not to be all there is, for this not to be the end. There's something hardwired in us to hope that, to want that. And then I said that I think Jesus is the best and maybe only evidence we have that it might actually be true. And I talked about that a little bit. And then I talked about just what an incredibly hard year this has been. You know, how no one has been exempted from feelings of loss and loneliness, pain, anxiety, depression. You know, all of us have had brushes with death. But the final quote I used was from The Lord of the Rings, actually, when Gandalf comes back from the dead and Sam Gamgee says, Gandalf, I thought you were dead. He said, but then I thought I was dead too. He said, is everything sad going to come untrue? And Gandalf says, a great shadow has passed. And then the passage says, and then he laughed, and it was like water in a parched land. And it occurred to Sam that he had not heard the sound of laughter, of unbridled merriment, since before he could remember. And that's what the resurrection means. It means that everything sad is going to come untrue. And that all the pain we've experienced, all the division of the past year, the divisiveness, the social and civil unrest, it's not forever. And if Jesus was God and came back from the dead, then he is with us. You know, he's with us today, and he was with us through all of that. He was with our loved ones who died alone in the hospital. They weren't alone. He was there with them. And so I talked about the resurrection as pointing to that there is more to this life than what we see, as we hope that there is, as we sort of long for there to be, and that Jesus is with us and will be with us through all the pains and sufferings of life.
Well, that's beautiful.
So yeah, that's what I talked about.
What Disney, what third tier Disney movie did you extol as great?
I didn't talk too much about it. I did mention Tangled, of course, which I did say I felt was vastly
But he
underappreciated.
mentions Tangled in every
and also
sermon.
Iron Giant.
Yes,
Giant.
beautiful.
Yeah. So lots of what's the other? I actually have not seen any of the what are the stupid vampire
Hotel
movies?
Transylvania?
No, not
Which
animated.
one?
The other one, the Mormon vampire movies.
Twilight? No.
Twilight. I've
Okay.
not seen any of that.
I
Although I hear
haven't
the books are
either.
good.
We're
I hear
too
the
old
books
for
are good.
that.
There's a resurrection.
Sarah, did you preach to your students at least?
I did.
Tell us what
I
you said.
did. Well, first I have to say how thankful I am for Aaron Zimmerman and for Jacob Smith. Their podcast that is put out by us. The name of it I cannot remember right now.
Same old song.
Same old song.
I wanted to say Well of Sound, Dave.
Oh, yes. Well, listen to that one too. But then,
Listen to that one
Plug
too.
away.
But it won't help you with your preaching, but it might. But Same Old Song it was honestly, guys, so helpful for me before this great tragedy in my life. But it is hard to write sermons when you're sad. And it has been incredibly, it's just been the only way I've been able to preach anything, is listening to them. So, I started with a story that I love that, I think I told when RJ and I were on staff together when I preached there. But in Jackson, there's this big fancy church called St. James. And it was not where I grew up going to church because it was too high cotton for us. But they had a preacher like 30 years ago who got in the pulpit on Easter Sunday. So like ladies are in hats, gentlemen are in seersucker. They're expecting a 25-minute sermon. Rector gets into the pulpit, takes a sip of water, clears his throat, leans in the mic and says, "It's all true," and then sits down. And I love that. So I told them that story and was like, obviously I'm not going to do that, cause it would be weird, at a college service, but then went on and, a lot of the stuff I got from Same Old Songs. I just don't know how I would do preaching without them. But they talked about like how people's pain is real. And so I was able to say to my students, like, it's all true. And also, just because we know how beloved we are by Jesus doesn't mean that we live lives without problems. Like, those problems are true too. Mental illness is true. My sadness is true. Like, these are true things. And, one thing I love that the guy said was that resurrection changes nothing in so many ways, because like we still have issues, we still have problems, but on the other hand, it changes everything because Jesus knows those problems, because Jesus bears those problems and died for those problems and loves us through them. And so anyway, it was a great sermon that Jacob Smith and Aaron Zimmerman and I wrote together. I was glad to preach it.
That's beautiful.
That's wonderful, Sarah. I think I keep thinking of that Buechner quote that people have passed around on social media every Easter, but like the Easter means that the bad thing is never the last thing.
Yeah.
And
I know, which means like such different things to me now. Like I just feel statements like that in such a deeper, more beautiful, more painful way. I saw that passed around and I was so thankful for it.
Yeah. I was going to read a little bit of what one of my favorite Easter sermons is, something that Paul Walker preached here in Charlottesville, and it was right before I got here actually. And he says that only God can write Act 5. Can write Act 5. He said, "We all know there are plenty of snakes slithering through Acts 1 to 4 of our lives. If your life is like mine, there are plenty of unresolved plot lines, unfortunate alliances, broken promises, premeditated betrayals, mixed motives, and loves lost that defy any hope of a happy ending. It may even seem to you that the author of your life is intent on writing a tragedy, resolved only by death at the final curtain. Thanks be to God, on Easter we are given an Act 5, the act only God can write. We are not left on our own to recognize the presence of God. As we see, Mary sees Jesus himself and doesn't recognize him. So what happens? Jesus recognizes Mary. What this tells us is that Jesus Christ calls your name even in the midst of your incomplete belief, your mistaken identities, and your failure to recognize the presence of God. At the center stage of Act 5 is not you. We see Jesus Christ standing beside an empty tomb, but not as a ghost or a phantom or a spirit. We see him with teeth, eyes, taste, everything. Death itself has been sent into oblivion. It is left lying powerless beside the discarded linen clothes. The tomb is all that is Sand's body because Jesus is alive. Jesus is alive and talks directly to Mary, consoles her, cheers her, instructs her, calls her by name. Today, this Easter day, this is Paul speaking, Jesus Christ is here. He is calling you by name, John, Catherine, Elizabeth, Paul. He knows your name and therefore knows your life. He is the author of your name and the author of your life. In him, all the unresolved plot lines and mistaken identities, the missed chances, and even the willful wrongdoing are resolved. It is not a resolution that we can contrive or even conceive, but know this. It is better than you could ask for or imagine, because only God can write Act 5. Easter Day, like our lives, begins in the dark, but ends in the light. For now we see in a mirror dimly, but when we are raised as he has been raised, all will be clear. All of it will make sense. There will be no more weeping, no more sick society, no more mistaking, no more misunderstanding. There will be no more need for clues, no more guesses at God's presence. His presence will be all in all. There will be only Jesus Christ at the very center, shining brighter than 1,000 suns. And the best part of this is, Act 5 will never, ever, ever end.
So good.
That's good.
Well,
P walk. Okay.
It's funny. There was a couple that came after. We had 3 services, and after the sunrise service, this couple came after me, and they were like, "So that's great about heaven and all, but what about the people who are going to be there that we don't like?"
they really said that to you?
They really did.
You must have really heard what I was saying.
I said, that's so funny. I said, here's what the Bible says about heaven. What's so great is that we're going to be different, and we're not going to be the jealous, sinful, angry. We'll be the same people, but we'll be able to engage fully in relationships with each other, with ourselves, with God in a way that we couldn't before. And they'd never heard that. And so I mentioned that in my 10 o'clock sermon, and people loved that. They're like, I'll like in heaven, I'll like the people I don't like now.
Yeah.
I'm like, yeah, and the people that don't like you are going to like you too. And they'd never heard that before.
Yeah.
That heaven was going to be this totally redeemed existence, which is kind of, that in Act 5, it'll all be resolved. Every tear will be wiped away.
Well, you said at one time, RJ, that like so much of the sin we experience and the dysfunction and the, the relational breakdown is so much a result of us acting out our own fears and things that we're afraid we're going to lose or going to be taken away from us or we'll never receive. And what would you be like if you really, if without that fear? Like, what would it be like
if you weren't
scared anymore? That's what Mary Carr says. What would you write if you weren't afraid? That's what I have to keep telling myself. What would I write if I wasn't afraid of how it, this person, that person?
Yes.
And, the truth is, this is why I think Christian community or whatever have you, like when people feel that loved, they become more likable, and they become a little easier to take, and like annoying people become a little less annoying, not because you find them less annoying, but because when some of the fears are silenced just a little bit, you find you actually like people that you didn't think you could like, and maybe you entertain the fact that they might find you that likable too. I mean, you've said that to me before about heaven and about sort of what will melt away in the twinkling of an eye. And I think a lot of it's the stuff, the ego fear structures that make us so hard to love, make us so intent on
Creates so much
self-justification, that make us, duplicitous and all these things. I don't know. What Sarah, what do you think about all that?
I mean, I think that stuff's really hard for me to talk about right now.
Yeah.
Yeah,
of course. Yeah.
Just is. So I'm glad for RJ's words. I'm glad for your words. I'm it's a funny thing because it's so easy for me when I'm with people who have lost people, as a pastor to talk about those people being in heaven, to have those conversations with them. It's very difficult when it's people who were just here.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's hard. But I'm thankful for you guys and for your faith and for your words. And, I feel like God has given me over and over again people who just fill that gap of the struggle with belief that I have. And I definitely count you too among that group of people.
Well, thank you. I mean, I think even if you're in a different spot too, like the reason I read a Easter sermon is because I need to hear it, from someone else. It's very difficult to summon this within yourself if you're.
If it's your family, it's just hard. It's just which is a great lesson actually for me pastorally. It's just harder to imagine. So
because sometimes preaching the resurrection to someone who's really in grief, and I guess we're all in some sort of grief. But if who's active, acute grief, it can be the least pastoral thing in the world. That's one of the
yeah. And that's why I didn't know how Easter was gonna go for me. But like Josh just spoke about like God's very singular love for us, and I needed that. So anytime a grieving person shows up at church, it's such an act of faith because, we don't know how we will respond and we don't know what we will hear. So I'm married to the priest, so I knew he was going to screw it up, but.
That's a charitable thing to say. Imputation yet again.
He's also, just to name it, like he's in deep grief too. So, I kind of know I can trust his sermons, right? For that reason, because we're both in that place. So anyway,
the emotional tenor is going to be unavoidably powerful. It can't be false, or I can't imagine how it could be, even no matter what he's saying. Well, RJ, Mr. Easter 2021, crowned King of Easter.
The King of Easter.
Ridiculous. That's
RJ,
absurd.
King is Jesus. RJ's the prince.
RJ has trampled down media indifference to.
Well, I enjoyed it for a couple days, but today I'm back to being myself, unfortunately.
Well, why don't you give us...
Today there's emails to answer and laundry to fold.
Yes, there is. Forever and ever, amen.
Rutger, what's next then? What are you preaching on this Sunday?
I'm not preaching.
Good.
Rob Lofberg is preaching.
Nice.
Well,
yeah.
He sounds like a great preacher. I don't know who he is, but sounds good.
He's
he's a common friend of David mine, so looking forward to that.
fantastic. Well, all right. I think we can stop it there. We'll probably... we'll pick up in a couple weeks, but thank you both, and happy Easter to everyone who's listening, and
Happy Easter,
guys.
talk to you soon. Bye.
All right.
Bye.
Thank you for listening. Remember, you can find us on the web at www.mbird.com, and we'd always love to hear from you at info@mbird.com. Audio production for the Mockingcast is provided by TJ Hester. And if you like what you've heard, please drop over to iTunes and leave us a rating or review. Until next time.
Praise the Lord. Praise the Lord.